You've heard of the standard 100 days Minecraft videos from people like Luke the Notable. You've seen YouTube videos of games having their own version of the 100 days format, but not scrapmechanic. I was looking for a type of 100 days style video format for the game, but to my knowledge, it doesn't exist. Until now. Welcome to what is potentially the first scrapmechanic 50 days video on YouTube. Since the game considers the number 0 as day 1, I'll add it in. Basically, I collected stuff such as seeds, wood, etc. And I also got to destroy the first bots of the world along with working on the first vehicle to build in the game. Now, on actual day 1, I completed the first car achievement and then immediately rebuilt the car to make it manageable to drive with for now. While driving, I discovered some ruins and eventually the mechanic station. Day 2 was where I settled down in the mechanic station and set up my stuff near the ocean, where I also set up 6 crop plots. From what I understand about the game so far, more than 9 crop plots will guarantee a raid warning for bots to attack your farm. Also in day 2 was when I explored the first ruin of the world. For the next day, I finally created the crop plot. Now I can build all the things that survival mode has to offer as of this recording. Later in the day, I've modified my car to have pipes for the tire areas rather than have wood for the axles. And I've added a gas container for more gasoline storage so that I don't have to worry about refueling. Day 4 was primarily grinding for resources and also to get better wheels for my car. Day 5, I now had regular wheels, in which the rest of the day was gathering resources. This game really pushes for a modern day version of hunting and gathering, but with extra steps. Next day, I did some more grinding, but now I can make a better gas engine to replace the scrap engine for good. As for storage, I made a small chest to store my stuff into, well, as much as I can put into it. Following day was dedicated to making a small truck from scratch since I wanted to have more room to carry stuff, which is the reason for why I was collecting scrap wood. The next day, I went to the trader for the first time to take a look at what he was selling. Good stuff, but I'm more interested in the spud gun, which I plan to get in this 100 days video. During the day, I was also reorganizing my farm table, and then at night I went to loot another ruin. Fast forward to day 9, I went looting again, but I was focusing on making a drill to use for mining stone and metal 1. So I did that and made the drill, along with a controller to power it with infinite power. Next would be a new switch and probably a new chair to get more connections. On day 10, I was testing out the controller at level 4, along with making a switch for the controller itself. Turns out the drills need a level 5 controller to deliver the speed needed to crush rocks. During the day, I explored around the area nearby the trader, and I discovered a desert biome with an oil pond in it. Now I know where to head to if I want large amounts of crude oil. Day 11, I began mining the first rock node closest to the mechanic station and started refining and collecting metal 1 and scrap stone. I'll be using them in the upcoming days ahead. I've also made a third small chest to organize my blocks into walls and making a better driver's seat to be able to add more connections to. Next day, I was planning on moving to a new location to build my new home onto, so I decided to explore and place down some stone flags to mark some locations to where I want to start building my new home onto, an area where I have access to water, oil, and clamp glue, along with enough space to build my home onto. On day 13, I've made the decision to build my new home at the lake that is close to the packaging station and the trader. So, I began building the foundation of my house while also hitting trees to collect more scrap wood for the house. The following day, I continued working on the house, followed by some more tree breaking. Later on, I began making brick blocks because I planned to build a brick fence for my new home, in which I needed more scrap stone, and so I went mining for the night. More mining for day 15, and then I went back to the crafting bot to make more brick blocks to which I was ready to build a brick fence, and so I got to work on building the fence into the night. The same can be said for day 16, but this time I'm gonna add a layer of brick blocks to the fence, and this was also where I began to take all of my stuff and move into my new home that is still in development. Now into day 17, I've packed all of my things onto my truck along with the craft bot and left the mechanic station. Once I've unpacked and organized my stuff into my new home, I rebuilt the farm and planted over 9 crops to get my first raid warning in the game. And later in the night, I waited patiently within the remaining few minutes until the raid starts. And with day 18 came a few toad bots to fight off, which I did successfully. And the same thing would happen again, but this time I won't be planting crops and decide to pass the time by making a second drill to add to my truck and go mining until it was time to get ready for the raid. In which I managed to fight off the second raid successfully. During the morning of day 19, I want to collect some crude oil and as much clam glue as I can, since I want to make some glue. I also made a large chest to take to the packaging station to start packaging crops soon. Later on, I went to a ruin to get the necessary stuff to eventually make a vacuum pump. Day 20 was pretty much an inventory check type of day. I've made some stuff to spice up my truck at my base with the beacon. Later on, I decided to take a moment to see what my base looks like when I zoom out of my character. For now, I'll leave my base as it is, however, I do plan to expand it later on. For most of day 21, I went mining again for more stone and metal 1, and once again waited into the night for the raid to start. After dealing with the hate bots and toad bots, it was on day 22 that I began trading with the farmer, in which I begun the process of getting the spud gun. But before I even get the gun itself, I needed to grow the advanced crops, needed and also save a caged farmer and bring him back to the trader. The caged farmers are pretty much the equivalent of those diamonds that you see on most freemium games in a nutshell. Following day, I've made 3 large chests to improve my inventory space for the food and drinks, seeds, and the many blocks that I've refined and made in the game so far. The rest of the day was focused on getting some more milk to drink. Day 24 became the day where I've gathered some more, but it was later on that I decided to tear down the first house after making the first expansion of the walls on the property per se, and decided to make the new house bigger and use extruded metal for the new floor. In which I've continued into day 25. For the most part, I've completed the new house to the point where I can reorganize my stuff inside. The rest of the house will have to be completed in the long run because I was trying to save up some metal for future projects and stuff to craft for the next upcoming days ahead. And so on day 26, I went to go tear down and take almost all of the stuff from one of the shacks that I saw during the first few days when I was heading to the mechanic station, and all of the scrap wood was converted into wood one for future use. Day 27. I collected all the tomatoes that I grew and packed them to send to the trader. I now have orange seeds and banana seeds. All that's left is the blueberry seeds. I decided to explore some new areas and found a giant ruin with a couple of hay bots. Loot loot. Day 28, I made a water collection system to collect more water and have it ready for use to forge my metal 1 blocks into metal 2 and soon metal 3. All of the early game refining up to now was already getting tedious, which is why I decided to go to the mechanic station to make a refined bot for the first time. Day 29, I went to the mechanic station again to make a resource collector to haul all of those logs that I get from the rock geodes that I mine so that I can have the refined bot refine them all into blocks. A new day, but the grind set remains the same. Destroy bots and harvest their parts, destroy scrap chests for loot, and then I went to torment some hay bots out in the wheat fields. And later in the night, I made yet another liquid collecting system, but this time for the oil pond since I'm gonna need gasoline to keep my vehicle going. I started day 31 very early in the morning to finally set up the crude oil collector so that I can stock up on crude oil to use for gasoline or for other items like suspensions. Later on, I went to collect some cotton and loot a ruin. only to get knocked out by the hay bots. But I went back, got my stuff, and finished looting the ruin before heading back home. The next day was another standard day for survival. Plant and water crops, go explore new areas, destroy stuff for materials, you get the point. And then wait for the bots to come into the night leading into day 33. Okay, for this day, I was focusing on getting beeswax because I plan to build a watering vehicle for my crop plots so that I can get out of the early game way of watering crops. Gathered a lot of clam glue on day 34 to make glue for the items that I need for the watering vehicle, such as the water container. But I had crops growing, so that will have to wait for a moment. After taking a look at my vehicle and making some potential repairs on my walls, I started packaging my beetroot on day 35 and took them to the trader where I finally got the blueberry seeds. And now I have all of the tier 2 crops ready to grow. Later on, I started building my new watering vehicle as I also made some new parts for how I want it to look. Completing the watering vehicle for now, I decided to reorganize my crop plots into columns for the vehicle to spray water into. Later on, I went to another ruin to collect enough parts to finally make a welding tool, to which I've lowered the axles of the watering vehicle. For day 37, I was mostly grinding and waited into the night for the second consecutive raid to happen, because I watered the crops too late. After fighting off the raid, I've noticed that my walls are being exposed a lot more than usual, so at that point I decided to use Scrapman's wall defense concept and expand it outwards so that it will buy me time to take out the hay bots and tote bots. For the rest of the day, I went mining and created some more metal too, so that I can eventually make some off-road suspensions later on. More mining on day 39. I didn't plant crops since I wanted to focus on getting some beeswax later, and some additional parts for what I'll build in the final 10 days. Now on day 40, I began crafting the items that I need to eventually upgrade my multi-purpose vehicle into a bigger one by converting the scrap wood into wood 1, making the suspensions, and the bigger wheels. The rest of the day was focused on collecting some corn for milk. Early in the morning on day 41, I began dismantling my cargo truck and began building a bigger one to hold more items onto. During the day, I took it for a test drive to the trader and back to eventually finish up the bottom part at night, which will continue into day 42. And by the morning, my new and bigger cargo vehicle was ready to go. I might need to make some modifications to it, but for now, it's fine. So at night, I went to go rescue a caged farmer. After playing some kind of advanced golfing with the caged farmer and taking off the roof of the cage completely, I brought him to the trader where I then made the cage of the cargo truck taller. Later on, I looted another ruin, got knocked out, had my redemption with the hay bot and continued looting. By around midnight, I prepared to plant the first of the tier 2 crops along with some tier 1 crops. And on day 44, I got to planting. During the morning, I gathered the materials needed to make a cookbot to finally make the god tier food of the game and leave the early game way of consuming crops for good. Later on, I wanted to redo my watering vehicle into the style of an armored vehicle, but for farming. Day 45 became the first time that I've made veggie burgers because they are more convenient to make than pizza burgers. I've also modified the watering vehicle with extra gasoline slots and made it manageable to drive while I spray the water downwards. It was another day of collecting and grinding for day 46 till the raid timer reached 0 as I checked to see if I was close to having enough blueberries and oranges to buy the spud gun. Fighting off this raid, it would be the last one where I used my sledgehammer against bots. So first off, I made a modification to the scrapman horizontal wall by adding in a metal wall as the final layer. And then during the morning, I brought my blueberries and oranges to pack and sent to the trader. And it was on day 47 that I now owned my very first spud gun, effectively making me a modern mechanic in the world. I knew that my ammo supply for the spud gun was very low, so I decided to plant more potato seeds along with some other crops in the night. For the rest of day 48, I was experimenting with making a ramp/platform to bring the watering vehicle to and from the Bay Area, only to scrap the idea entirely and waited for the bots to come as usual. After clearing out the bots from the outside, I dealt with the toad bot destroying my crops, in which I lost 80% of what I grew. So, I instead planted only potatoes and used fertilizer on them to grow faster. As the amount of hay bots would increase with the raids that I do, my home will need more security, so I've added wiring to the windows. And we finally arrive on day 50. Destroyed all of the bots, went mining, and returning home, I got a visitor. As I wrap up this final day, I decided to patch up the hole in my house that was caused by the hay bots with wood 1. And that's where my 50 days of scrap mechanic ends. Thanks for watching.